Hello, so we're going to look at another 10 entries into my top 100 lessons that I've learned about board game design and the board game industry over about 10 years or so that I've been making games. I'm Adam Porter, I'm a game designer from Wales. I've got a number of published games on the market. I make lots of videos about game design on this channel. If you like what I do, please subscribe, comment, and share the video. And today we're looking at numbers 60 through to 51. I have a deck of cards which I have written different lessons that I've learned on, and the topics that we're going to talk about today are on the side of the screen. Okay, through the magic of editing you can see them, but I don't know what they are, or at least you can see a teaser of them. I'm not giving it all away in this single screenshot here. A signed contract doesn't mean that your game will be published. Yeah, that's a harsh lesson that you learn as a game designer. This has happened to me maybe 5 times at this point. I have 8 games on the market. I've got another 2 with contracts, I think at the moment, 2 or 3 with contracts. And in the past I've had other contracts, maybe 5 other contracts, something like that, where at a later point the game has been dropped and never actually published. Now sometimes I've received an advance payment, which softens the blow a little bit, although the blow is still there. Really, I didn't do it for just to get a chunk of money. It's not always that big an amount. You know, I wanted to see the game produced, but it's been handed back to me. I'm trying to think if it's ever been handed back to me and then I've gone on and got that published with somebody else. I think in every case, I've put it on the shelf and I've gone, you know, I don't want to go through that again. And so I've got a number of games sat on my shelf that previously have been licensed to a publisher, and yet I've not done anything with them. Maybe I ought to go back to them. But I think as a new designer, you might get lulled into a false sense of security. Just because you've signed a contract, it doesn't mean your game is going to get published. That's why you need to have something in the contract, an advance payment where you get money up front. So if they drop it, well, you haven't lost everything. Or maybe you have a clause in there where they have to give you like a severance payment. You know, if they terminate the contract without producing the game, they pay you at that point. Something in there to protect you. Nonetheless, it's always gutting because the game doesn't get made. Okay, there's no way around this. This is a sad fact of the industry. Okay, everything is weighted towards protecting the publisher. They can kind of decide to do what they like. That signing that contract is giving them the option of publishing your game. A hard lesson to learn. Don't assume your game doesn't work with 2 players. Yeah, this is a bit of a personal one for me. It's happened a couple of times now where I've made a game and I've just assumed that this is a 3-player game. One of them is a sort of auction game. One of them was a trick-taking type game. Just assumed doesn't work with 2 players. Only ever play-tested it with 3 or more. And then you're some way through the process and somebody says, well, or your playtesters haven't turned up. That's what's tended to happen. You know, you've gone to a playtest meetup and there's only the 2 of you, and you think, well, what do we do now? My game only plays with 3. Well, I suppose we could give it a go with 2. It's not going to work. And then you play it and you think, oh, do you know what? It works fine. Try it. Okay, just try it. You might assume that your game isn't going to work with 2 players. Try it. Don't limit yourself on the basis of an assumption. That's part of your playtesting. Try it out with different player counts. It might be the other way. You assume it can't work with higher counts, like 6, 7, 8 players. Try it. See what happens. Okay, and it may be that unlocks something. There's no doubt that publishers would like to have a wide player range. 2 to 8 players would be an amazing player range, right? You're not going to get there probably, but it could be 1 to 8 players. Wow, that would be amazing, assuming that all those player counts work effectively. If your game doesn't work well at 2 players, don't force it, right? There's nothing worse than a game that says it plays with 2 players and you play the 2-player mode and it's a load of rubbish. Okay, and it should have just been 3 or 4 players and upwards. I can understand why people do it for marketing reasons, but that's never a good experience. Your game will never be bigger than Monopoly. What is bigger than Monopoly? Maybe chess? Maybe Go? Your game is not going to be chess or Go. Your game is not going to be bigger than Monopoly, so don't say it is. This should go without saying. I mean, if you've watched anything on this channel, I hope that you're more professional than going into a meeting with a publisher and saying, this is going to be the next Monopoly, this is going to be bigger than Monopoly, immediately you're flagging yourself up as, you know, not knowing anything about the industry, frankly, not having done any research, not having learned anything about the industry. Monopoly is massive, massive. And it's massive not because it's a brilliant game, it's massive because it's a brilliant, magnificent, enormous brand with massive history behind it and full of recognizable brand assets that can be sold into all different types of products. The actual game is just a tiny part of it. Monopoly is huge. Your game is not going to be bigger than Monopoly. Should go without saying that one, shouldn't it? If you design light games, don't read BGG comments. Okay, I think I touched on this in the last video. Board Game Geek comments, I read them all. If I'm buying a game, they're really valuable to me, right? If I'm buying a game, I want to know what are the comments from the people who love the game and what are the comments from the people who hate the game. Those are the two that I look at. I look at the 1, 2s and 3 comments, and I look at the 8s, 9s and 10s comments. Don't really care about the stuff in the middle. I want to know why people love it and I want to know why people hate it. Okay, and I don't care about the overall score really. I just want to know about those two extremes. It is depressing reading the comments of your own game when it's been published, particularly if you produce very light, simple games like I do, because the Board Game Geek website leans heavily towards people who play strategy, maybe not heavy strategy, but even medium weight strategy games. My games aren't really that, okay? And so if I have a game that's pretty random, a game that's intended for children, you know, ages 6 and up, and then I've got a bunch of hardcore gamer adults who happen to have played it at a convention, or their friends forced them to play it, or they've played it with their kids, and then they go and rate it on Board Game Geek. Not going to get very positive comments, and it's not going to be much fun to read. Do I stop myself reading it? I try, but I always give in. I could go a few weeks, even maybe a couple of months without reading the comments, and then I always give in and end up reading the comments. And it's never fun, not really, okay? Never gets me anywhere. Don't read them. Don't read them. You don't learn anything from them. Read comments for games you're going to buy. Don't read comments for your own games. Blind playtests are powerful and always surprising. Yeah, absolutely. Blind tests are great. They're really, really good. This is where you get somebody to play your game, learning it from the instructions that you've written, and you don't interfere at all. You don't say anything. Ideally, I like to be in the room. I want to watch them playing it. I want to see and feel the experience, the emotions, the laughter, the chatter. I want to see where they're struggling. I want to see what the problems are with that rulebook. I want to be able to see it all. Now, you could capture a lot of that on camera if you can get somebody to film their test and send it to you. I don't think you can do it effectively in writing. If you send a game to somebody and ask them to send you a report on how they got on, I find that information useless really, because you don't know what mistakes they've made. You don't know whether they were even playing the game correctly. You've got to be watching it. But blind playtests always throw up things that you weren't expecting. You can think, and I do frequently, I think my rule books are extremely robust. I think I'm really good at writing rules. And then I get somebody to learn the game, and either there's a rule missing. That's not usually the case. Usually all my rules are there, but they've just totally misinterpreted it. Or just they haven't read the rule, because although it's written in there, I've shoved it under an image somewhere. You know, I've put it in an area of the way the page flows. People just don't read certain bits. Some bits need highlighting, some bits need repeating, and you only learn that by watching people using that rule book. Blind tests are great. Okay, hard to arrange. You feel bad asking people to do it because it's an extra effort you're asking them to do by learning the game from the rulebook, but they're great. So do it, okay, do it. At various stages in the process. Don't just leave it to the end. Do it at various stages as you're writing that rulebook and as you're learning about the game yourself. Think about cost of components now. Don't leave it. Don't leave it until you've nearly finished designing your game. Publishers are going to really pay attention to this stuff. It might be the deciding factor about whether your game gets made or not. And it can be very hard to change it at a later point. If you've built your game around, the core of your game is built around loads of expensive components, then you're stuffed when you get to the point of actually producing it and you find it's too costly. Think about it from the very beginning. How many cards? How many dice? How many counters? How many tokens? I often aim towards a specific publisher. Inevitably, they very rarely end up getting made by that publisher, but I might have a publisher in mind and I look at their box size and I think, would it fit? Particularly if it's a card game. How many cards fit in this publisher's box? Right, you can only fit 70 cards in this box. So there's no point me designing the game with 80 cards. I've got to design it with 70 cards. Can I fit any tokens in there? Well, this other game in the range had 60 cards and 10 tokens. So if I can reduce the cards, put the tokens in, that might work. You've got to think about the components now. What fits, how much it costs, do it from the very earliest stages. Write down compliments. Yeah, this goes hand in hand with the thing about don't read the BGG comments. Write down compliments. I have more compliments than I have negative comments, far more. But the things I remember are the negative comments. That's why this YouTube video is so lovely. I get so many warm, friendly, supportive comments. And then the occasional one that's a little bit more critical, usually with really good reason, like the good constructive feedback. And they're the ones that stick with me, and they're the ones that I beat myself up about, okay? Write down the compliments. So when you're feeling a bit low, go back and read them and they'll lift you. Okay, I've got a journal that I use for productivity and gratitude and all these sort of, like a mindfulness type exercise. Writing down compliments is a really good way of keeping your mental health in check. Make pretty prototypes if it makes you happy. There will be a lot of people in this industry, particularly in game design circles, who will tell you, don't make pretty prototypes, don't waste your time laying out artwork, creating nice artwork, all that sort of stuff. It's a waste of time. It makes you too attached to the game. It means that the game is no longer disposable. You're going to be unwilling to change anything. And all those things are sort of true. You don't need pretty artwork on your games. You don't need to make the prototype pretty. You don't need to spend hours and hours and hours laying things out. And it could make you resistant. I certainly meet people who will not change their game. And if they've, pinned down their artwork and they're unwilling to change it, that's a problem. But if it makes you happy, if it brings you joy to lay out artwork, it really does for me. I love it. I go into a sort of Zen mode on my computer, laying out artwork, finding images to use, positioning them. None of these are going to end up in the finished product, but just getting a feel for what this game could look like, what this world is that I'm creating, a mood. Okay, I love it. I love doing it. It makes me happy. It makes me fall in love with the game, right? And that's a really valuable part of the process to me. Might not be to you, okay? So when people tell me, it's a waste of time, it's not for me, actually. It's not a waste of time. And I think, fortunately, I don't get too attached to them. I'm quite willing to throw stuff away and start again because it means I'm laying out artwork all over again and I really enjoy it, okay? It's finding the hours that's the difficult bit. So if it makes you happy, yeah, make them pretty. Why not? Why not? If it brings you joy. Research and methodically look for gaps. This is a bit of a personal one again. Okay, this is something I do a lot and I found it really, really valuable. I've never heard anybody else really talk about this. It's what I do on this channel. You know those videos on this channel? There's a lot of them which say how to design a deck building game, or top 10 mechanisms in a polyomino game, or top 10 ways to design a party game. In these videos, I'm methodically going through my collection, finding all the games that fit into that category and other games that I've played and the most popular games on Board Game Geek, and I'm trying to look for similarities between them. And always 10, that's my guiding thing, right? Let's find 10 key facets of that genre of game, 10 things that people frequently do when they design these games. It's hard time consuming, and you've got to have a lot of knowledge about the industry, watch a lot of videos, read a lot of rule books, play a lot of games. But if you do it, you get this sort of encyclopedic knowledge of mechanisms and games and how they work, and that frees up, you learn about gaps, like what's not been done. Okay, and how can I take one of these mechanisms and flip it on its head? Or how can I take this mechanism and this mechanism and combine them, because that doesn't appear to have been done. It's not the be all and end all, right? I still think it's better to think about your audience. Think, what does my audience want, rather than this sort of experimentation approach. Because if you're thinking about, right, well, I want to take this mechanism from, I don't know, Dominion, and this mechanism from, I don't know, Isle of Cats, and cram them together and see what happens. It's a fascinating experiment, right? But you haven't really thought about whether anyone would want to buy that game. And I think that's your starting point. Who's my audience? Who am I designing for? And then just this is one way in. Interaction is wonderful. Feedback is equally important. Yeah, we don't hear an awful lot about feedback in games. I talk about it a lot in my videos, but I don't hear about it so much from other people. And I hear a lot of criticism of games for being multiplayer solitaire, okay? Because there's not that much interaction between the different players. And I get it, it's a problem because there's lots of players out there who don't like that. And if there's lots of players out there who don't like that, then your game's not going to sell as well as it could. But the game can provide interaction. A game should be providing interaction, right? A game should be responding to the actions that the player takes. So if a player does something, the game should respond in some way, give you something, some sort of feedback. Now in some games, if it's a dexterity game, that's physical feedback, right? That's a tactile sensation of flicking a piece or moving a piece or dropping a piece. In most games though, it's like a reward or a penalty. I do something and then the game responds, gives me stuff back. I talk to the game and the game speaks back to me. It's a really key facet of games, and it makes up a lot for lack of interaction. That's why solo games work so well, right? A really strong solo game feels great because the game is talking to you. The other players aren't, but the game is giving you that response instead. Okay, so don't just worry about interaction. Think about feedback from the game. Is the game responding to what you're doing? Okay, there's another 10. Well, we've done the first 50 in this top 100. I hope you're learning something from it. I think I am. I think I'm absorbing stuff. I know I've written these things, but thinking this stuff through, reflecting on 10 years of game design is helpful for me, I think. Please come back and watch future episodes, and I'll see you next time. All the best.